Welcome back to Cinema Flicks and Music Picks. I'm Dave, your host with most of the beast with the least. And the least we can do today is continue on with Jimmy Stewart month. It's a wonderful month, except for the weather as it teems down outside. Today we're going to be talking about a lesser known Jimmy Stewart movie, as I promised you yesterday. We're going to go a bit left field and we're going to take a trip, you and I, not them, just you and I, to Magic Town. Yes, 1947's Magic Town, where the guy with the dynamite heart meets the girl with the firecracker eyes. Jane Wyman, James Stewart, Magic Town. Forget about it, Jake. It's Magic Town. So, why did I pick this today? Well, first of all, because I could. Second of all, it's election day here in the UK. We've got local elections up and down the land, and this one came to mind. You could say, well, you know, wouldn't Mr. Smith come to... Well, it's a long month, okay? Plenty of time. And we don't want to do all the big hitters at the start, do we? So we don't want to do all the Hitchcocks up front or all the Anthony Mann westerns up front, you know, we need to pace ourselves. So we're going to slow things down a little bit with a nice little film, Magic Town. The story of, and this is how it ties into the elections, Jimmy Stewart is a big city boy, young business type who's into stats and numbers, and we discover that his occupation is the very early days of polling, of surveying the numbers and data to make predictions based on it. So in elections, he can give you the predictions, but also for products and, you know, what the customers want, consumers want, that kind of thing. Marketing makes polling for elections. It was all kind of wrapped into one back in those days. And they had external agencies that did both. Still do, of course, paid multi-millions. So Jimmy Stewart's one, and he has just been fired at the start of the film, just been let go, because they think he's got a crackpot theory. And his crackpot theory is that statistically there must be a town, an anomaly, but out there, the United States must be big enough that there's a town which represents something statistically close to what the populace in general believe. So one town that he can measure, instead of having to canvass hundreds of thousands, millions of people, one small town, easily done, at less expense to the customer, whoever's the company or the party, and more profit for Jimmy Stewart. So he's come up with this crackpot idea, gets fired for nobody believes him. Wouldn't you know who won the pony? Jimmy Stewart's right, and he finds it about 5 minutes after he gets fired. He finds out, reading the papers, there is indeed this Magic Town. So him and his couple of associates head down there, and Jimmy tells them if they know they're being watched, you know, it's a bit like the old scientific experiment, to observe something is to ostensibly change it just because it now knows it's being observed. I can't remember the name of that experiment. I think it was the Bela Lugosi experiment. So he says, we better fit in, we'll pretend to be insurance salesmen because everybody trusts them. No personal experience, obviously. Moving on. So they just slip into the conversation. Hey, mister, you want to buy insurance? And what do you think about that Barry Goldwater guy? You know, that kind of thing. And very soon, Jimmy Stewart wins over this town, and things are going very, very smoothly. They do indeed predict things accurately. You know, the first couple go terrifically well. But, there's always a but, isn't there? There has to be drama in these films. There has to be some peril. Has to be some, oh well, actually no peril at all. It says not likely to offend or harm, so, you know, no stakes. There would be stakes if it was Bela Lugosi, wouldn't there? But the drama comes from Jane Wyman. She is the owner, really, of the local newspaper. Her father owned it, but they keep it in his name, and she now owns it with her aunt as the operator, and they, Jimmy Stewart and Jane Wyman, fall for each other, and Jimmy Stewart really does start to fall for this little town. You know, it's a very Eisenhower USA town. You know, it's all small picket fences. It's very Blue Velvet. But at the time, that 1947, that would have still been considered the ideal. So it is idyllic. But how long can that keep going on? Because James Stewart has to, eventually something's going to click, and he has to tell that, look, I'm not who I say I am. I'm actually, still a nice guy, but I'm secretly a major businessman poster who works for the government and will sell all your secrets. Gene Wyman doesn't take terribly kindly to this and puts it in the paper, and Jimmy Stewart says, no, if you put this in the paper, you will ruin this town. Trust me, you will ruin. I know I ruined it by coming here and doing this to you, but it'll be your fault. You, Jane Wyman. So she types up a story, that this town's remarkable, but Jimmy Stewart was a huckster. What happens? Well, every single pollster in America flocks into this little town, and all of a sudden the experiment, the Bela Lugosi experiment that we were just talking about, comes into effect. Because they now know they're being observed, their reactions are different, and the next time a poll is taken, they are miles out. Poll companies have charged companies and lost them fortunes. So this town is completely abandoned by everybody. They've lost all. They become the laughing stock of the country. They're a punchline on radio shows. We see radio comedians making fun of them. We see headlines mocking them. They're mocked by Amos and Andy, whatever that means. Lil Abner, I'm just throwing things from the past, hoping it sticks, but they're mocked by that kind of thing. And it's quite sad, because the town goes from a perfectly happy little town to quite a greedy little place where nobody cares for each other anymore, and people lock their doors now. But Jimmy goes back up to New York, the big city, wherever it may be, and says, he's offered the job by the head of the big agency who previously fired him, and said, well, that didn't work out, but now that you know the formula, you can find somewhere else, and we can do it again. We can rebuild him. And Jimmy says, you know what? Shove it. I'm going back to Bedford Falls. Wait a minute, that was the one in It's a Wonderful Life. Well, it's the same kind of place. So he goes back down and tells Jane Wyman, listen, Jane Wyman, I love you. I really do. And Jane Wyman says, it's all very well and good, Jimmy Stewart, but the town's desolate. The money that was going to come in through investment now isn't coming in. And we don't even have enough to build the new school that was supposed to be built. So Jimmy Stewart and her collude to entrap the mayor into using old quotes that he made when he thought the town was going to be booming, into convincing the town that the mayor has said them recently to G them up. And so it looks as though the mayor's saying things like, we will build this town brick by brick on our own if needs be. And that inspires the people because they think the mayor's just said it, even though he was saying it completely in a different context. So she's not playing very well with the truth. She's a dodgy journalist. They're both really terrible people for quite a nice family film. And the town is all G'd up, and it is It's a Wonderful Life ending. It's a Wonderful Life came out the year before, and both were massive flops. People forget that now because It's a Wonderful Life's become a perennial favourite, but they probably would believe of Magic Town since nobody knows it, and it's on an absolutely no frills DVD from Screenbound, who used to be a no frills crappy label but now do really nice horror things. All's happily ever after. The town just decides that hard luck and pluck will get us through. Why, I'll do the plumbing, me and the boys will take care of the woodwork, and don't worry about the water, everybody chips in. I don't think they've thought this through. You know, you can't build an actual, you know, a big town. It's not just 10 kids or something. Dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens. It's going to be a big building. Anyway, so it strangely ends up in a kind of socialist ideal, which I'm not sure is the kind of message that in 1947 they would have intended, and certainly not the kind of message that Jimmy Stewart would have endorsed if he'd really thought it through. But the town ultimately decides that every man a king, to quote Huey Long, the kingfish himself. Shout out to anybody from New Orleans, especially Harold. And merrily they go along. That's kind of it. It's a bizarre little movie where there's no real comeuppance for his shysterism and lying to Jane Wyman, and there's no real comeuppance for her being incredibly dubious as a journalist and using her position to manipulate the mayor. They do put in a tiny plot about the mayor not putting it to a public vote, you know, when he should have, but you know, that's really to just excuse what she's done. So really these are probably the bad guys of the film. If these two weren't in the movie, the town would have been happy all along and would never have had the misery in the first place. It's a wonderful life indeed, folks. So really the magic is that they are slightly helping to fix a town that they massively broke in the first place. And they've brought socialism to town to do so. It's the only reading of it you can have. I'm telling you that is. However, it's got some great pedigree behind it. It's directed by William Wellman, a true great of American cinema. The original Star is Born, for example, but you know, look up at the CV and it's just, you know, the 20s, 30s, 40s. It's just classic after classic. We all know who Jimmy Stewart is. We're doing a whole month of him, for goodness sake. And Jane Wyman, megastar herself. Just not long after this, she'd already been a star for a couple of years, but would go on to even bigger fame in the 50s, and certainly her enduring legacies and things like For All That Heaven Allows. You know, she'd done a couple with Douglas Sirk, and those are perhaps some of her best roles. They called them melodramas, women's pictures, but they're just wonderful dramas, and she's great in them. And they're both great in it too. The only thing I would say is that Jimmy never ever feels as cynical as he needs to when he's still the big city boy coming to the small town. He needs to be more like, if you've seen the musical The Music Man, he needs to be more of that kind of huckster. And 10 years later, again this was 47, the perfect casting for this wouldn't have been Jimmy Stewart, it would have been Jack Lemmon, because he could have pulled off that, you know, apartment-like figure where, yeah, he works for the big business and whatnot, but we all know he's just a schmo, and he will do the right thing if he's face to face with an actual person. So we could believe somebody like Jack Lemmon would, in his office, be able to just write people off as numbers, but when he's face to face with them, would be able to do the opposite and treat them as human beings. You don't quite believe that of Jimmy Stewart. He's far too personable for that to come across. And I think this is a rare example of the film's not using his persona to its best. It is used really well in the later parts of the picture, where his turnaround, his George Bailey seeing what his life would have been like without him kind of moments. But it's the build up to it. He's just far too nice to ever convince you that he would have done anything this cynical and deceitful in the first place. So it's a nice little film. It's fun to read it like I did as an advertisement for socialism, given Jimmy being quite right wing, and this being at the height of the House of Un-American Activities Commission's era. So yeah, I wonder how it played if people had that in mind. But luckily nobody saw it anyway, so it didn't really matter. It was a massive flop. Well, listen, thank you very much as always for watching. I told you we'd find one a bit left field. My rules are no 2 westerns in 2 days back to back, no 2 Hitchcocks in 2 days back to back. Again, just to spread them out and vary things for people, so, and for myself if nothing else. So we'll see what comes tomorrow. I'm off, you do the same, and I'll see you tomorrow. For now though, stay very careful out there, and Love and rest, my dears.